Hi everyone, John here from All Miniatures Great and Small, and today we're going to cover the 5 rules you didn't know in Flames of War. Alright, the first rule that's tripped me up in the past, and I bet it's tripped up a lot of you guys before, is when a unit is in command and when a unit needs to take its last stand check. So this is a subtle rule because it happens in 2 different phases and you have to kind of remember what's going on. So to be in command, just to go over that again, is a team has to be within a certain distance of the command team of that unit. So the Sherman, for example, has to be within 6 inches of the command Sherman. And this Sherman has to be within 6 inches of the command Sherman. These 3 teams are now in command. If this guy had been left way behind here, behind these woods, outside of 6 from him, these 2 would still be in command. He would not be in command with the appropriate penalties for being out of command. Now that in and of itself is pretty simple, but the trick to this rule is the whether you're in command or not is determined at the end of the movement phase until the next movement phase. So for the allied players it would be I move them here, they're in command until the next allied movement phase where we'd do that check again. Now why is that hard to follow is because let's say you have these 3 tanks here and we take a hit on the command tank and we fail our swapping roll. Kaboom, my tank is destroyed. So at the beginning of the allied player's turn, you normally check to see if your units are in good spirits. So during the movement phase, these 3 tanks moved up. During the Germans' turn, they blew up that tank in the middle. Then back at the start of the allied player's turn, we're going to check to see if any of our units are not in good spirits and need a last stand check. So you might at first glance look at this unit and say, well, there's only, regardless of which one the commander jumped in, there's only 1 tank that's in command because he is outside. If this is the new commander, he is outside of 6. So obviously that's 1 tank in command and 1 tank out of command. Therefore you need a last stand check. But that's not right, because these 2 tanks were in command along with the commander at the end of the allied player's movement step, and they stay that way until the end of the next allied player movement step. So in this situation you might say, all right, well, the Sherman needs a last stand check, and that's wrong. So that's a subtle rule, and I've gotten it wrong several times because it's just a little bit counterintuitive, because when you look here to see if it's in command, well, it's no longer in command, but it doesn't really matter because we make that determination in the movement step. So these guys, even though he's more than 6 inches away from that commander, he is still in command until the movement step. And what that does is, instead of running away earlier, it gives the allied player a chance to move these guys closer together and get them in command at the end of the next allied player step, so they don't lose it. Now this is subtly different than if we had left this guy back here behind the woods out of command, and these 2 tanks were the only ones that drove forward. If he gets exploded, the same exact situation, well, during the beginning of the allied player's turn, during the starting step, we would look at this unit. Because this guy got left behind in the preceding movement step, he was out of command. He's still in command. He doesn't count anymore. So in this case, the unit would need a last stand check because there's only 1 unit in command and 1 unit out of command. Not because he died, but because he got left out of command, and that was a conscious choice by the allied player to leave him out of command, and they pay the consequences. But that is the rule for being in command. Next, assigning hits to command teams. So this can be a little confusing I know I always have to check the rule book every time I play, but let me explain. So you have the company HQ unit, which in this case is just going to be one Sherman. So he's the company commander, if you will, or the formation commander. And then you have a unit of Sherman 76s that are in the same formation. This would be like a black box support for that formation. So if the commander is targeted, the person who is shooting can include this command unit and basically attach it to another unit. Or to put it in a more simpler way, if the shooter targets the command HQ, let's say they get a bunch of Panzer IVs open up on it, and they're going to shoot 8 shots. Well, they could target the command Sherman, the command unit, and say, I want to also include the Sherman 76 unit as well. So you can attach basically your group, target one additional unit using the same targeting rules. So they'd have to be within 6 of him and so on. But, so the shots come in, he would have to take the first hit, obviously, but any additional hits could get splashed out to Sherman 76s, which can be very powerful. You can also, on the flip side, as the commander, try to swap that. Well, he didn't swap it, but if he did, he could move it over there, following all the normal rules for swapping hits, or the mistaken target rule. So that can be pretty powerful in a couple of ways. One way would be if you're a opponent looking at this and the Sherman 76 platoon has concealment behind a rock wall and the commander's out in the open. If you target the commander, you can include the Sherman 76s. He's easier to hit, but you can still put damage points out onto the Sherman 76s. So there are some situations where you can look to exploit that. But the important thing to know is the shooting person, so the Germans in this case shooting at that Sherman, get to choose if they want to include the Sherman 76s or not. And it has to be the same type of team, so you can shoot at a infantry command team and attach it to Shermans, to tanks, and so on. It would have to be the same type of team, tank team to tank team, infantry team to infantry team, and so on. So it's a way to deliver extra hits there and splash it out while still trying to kill or not overkill the command tank. Conversely, if the German player targets the Sherman 76s, he cannot splash one of the hits to the command tank. He would have to target the command tank to be able to splash those hits out to the Shermans. So just one way, and it doesn't go the reverse way. All right, so that is allocating hits to command. Winning the game on an objective. So to win the game on an objective, you have to read the rules for the scenario first. Some scenarios let you win immediately. If you can get the objective on turn 1, you win on turn 1. Some scenarios, missions require that you wait a certain amount of time, usually turn 6. You can't win the game until turn 6. So it lets you have some back and forth over the objectives. But as long as the objective is hot, as long as it's active, you can win the game by taking your opponent's objective. So here we have an American objective that the Germans are trying to get. To win the game, the Germans have to start their turn within 4 inches of the objective and end their turn with a good unit, an active unit or team, within 4 inches. So you can't just, I have my Hetzers here, in one turn I can't just in the movement step move up 4 and win the game. So it's a 2-step process. I have to spend that first turn driving up. Now I'm contesting this objective at the start, well, not at the start of my turn, during the movement step. So at the end of my turn, I'm contesting the objective, but since I didn't hold it at the start of the German player's turn, they don't win yet. Okay, so you can't drive up and win like you were able to before. Now, start of the next German step, I'm starting my turn here. Assuming everything else goes well, there's nothing around here to contest of the other person's side, at the end of my turn, I'm going to win. What this effectively means is your opponent is always going to get a turn to try to push you or shoot you off the objective. Because if you drive up on the German turn, they're going to have to sit there the whole Allied turn before they can try to win on their next turn, if that makes sense. So in that case, maybe the Americans drive up and shoot these guys off the objective or shoot them off at range. It doesn't matter as long as those rules are followed. Here, on the next turn, as long as these guys are still alive, the Germans can't win because the objective is being contested by active tanks. They would have to shoot off the Shermans, and they would get that too. If they started here on the German turn, these guys were here. If they kill all three at the end of the German turn, they would be the only thing contesting. They would be gone, and they would win. So there you go. You have to start your turn on the objective and end your turn on the objective without your opponent being able to contest in order to win or take over an objective. Trees and cover, forests. These are woods. We're using a Gale Force 9 Battlefield in a Box example. But woods and cover. So before we talk about cover with woods, we'll talk about cover with a building. So for example, if I have a Sherman here, and I'm shooting at this Hetzer, the Hetzer would be out in the open, but the Sherman could get concealment from the building because half of it is behind or being concealed, hidden from the German. So that's concealment using something like a hard building. However, the same situation does not apply with woods. If you have a Sherman poking around the side of the woods and the German player there, well, that's an open shot on the German, obviously, but it's also an open shot on the Sherman. Woods do not provide cover on the edges. The only way to get cover from woods is if you are in it completely. So just keep that in mind, because that wasn't that way, or at least that's not how almost everyone that I played with interpreted it in version 3. You could get concealment just by poking around the side of the woods, and he couldn't see half of that Sherman tank, so he would get concealment. In this version, that's not true. And that's one of the interesting things about the rule book. This rule is a rule because it's not mentioned as an exception. When in the rule book it talks about what things provide cover and how you get cover, woods are never mentioned in that conversation. So you don't get cover from them. So there you go, guys. Just a subtle thing that still throws me for a loop sometimes, but hopefully now you guys know what you were missing. Minefields. So clearing minefields is one of those things that it does come up in missions, because certain missions do allow defenders to have minefields. So it is something you're always going to have to come across, but if you're like me, I don't come across it often enough that I have the minefield rules memorized. So we always have to double check and see exactly how those minefield rules work. So the way they work is, if you have minefield tokens, I've got 2 here, anything that's moving within 2 inches of that minefield token risks getting destroyed. So if you want to move through the minefield, you're going to have to take a skill test. So you have to roll a die, basically. So when you move into the minefield or move through it, you roll a die and check a skill check. So let's see, these guys have a 3-up skill. They got a 6, so they're fine. Let's say they didn't have enough movement to completely cross the 2-inch radius here, so they're going to stay in. Let's say this guy goes and tries to enter the minefield too. He rolls a 1, so he fails. So he needs a test, an immediate test, to be destroyed. 3-up save for infantry. He's good, but since he failed, he can continue moving, but this unit is going to be pinned down at the end of when they're done moving. So let's say these two guys are just going to stay out, the commander's going to stay out, everyone's still in command. So these guys are now counted as being pinned down. Now, at the start of the next, these are German infantry, so the start of the next German turn, the platoon commander, the unit commander, can issue a mine clearing order as a movement order. Now, this is a movement order, so it's in place of blitz, follow here, all that stuff. It's the same type as those things, even though it's not listed in the normal movement order section of the rulebook. It's in the back under minefields. And I do want to clarify, when that happens, and in this case there's two minefields, two teams, he removes this one, he removes this one with that order. Those two guys can't move, shoot, or assault, or do anything because they're the ones that actually did the mine clearing. These guys could actually move, so you could still move your infantry forward after those minefields are gone. Just keep in mind, the people who did the actual mine removal, the ones that risked it all moving into the minefield and stayed there for a turn, those are the ones who cannot move while they're removing the minefields. So just there you go, folks. 5 rules you didn't know for Flames of War. Please let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Have you run afoul of any of these rules? I'd be really interested to hear from people who didn't know that these rules were rules, that these rules were kind of a surprise to them, or what your experience is with these rules. So I found all of these rules interesting. I think almost all of them were pointed out in comments from various battle reports that I or others have played on the channel, which is something we always appreciate, folks pointing out rules, because that's how we get better at the game. So I do appreciate all the comments that we've gotten in the past, and any comments you wish to leave down here below. As always, we do appreciate you watching. Please do consider giving us a like and subscribe. Click that bell to receive notification when we release new content. You can also check us out on Facebook and Instagram at All Miniatures Great and Small. If you like our Flames of War content, please do consider checking out our Patreon, where patrons get access to a Flames of War battle report exclusive to them every month. As always, thanks for watching, and keep on wargaming.